Okay, great.
Thanks. Yeah. Actually, if you're gonna record, I'm not gonna participate. Just kidding. No, no. So thank you so much for inviting me. It's good to see you. I My name is Dylan Stern, and my pronouns are he, him. Happy Pride, everyone. Happy Pride Month. I hope my introduction won't take too long so that we can really get into like a discussion with the rest of the panel members here, who I'm excited to also meet. So at the Delta Stewardship Council, I lead the some of the Delta Science Program funding efforts for applied research that is designed to inform water and environmental decision making in the Delta. And I've been with the council since 2015. And before that, I graduated with my master's from UC Santa Barbara at the Bren School. And before that, my bachelor's at Chico State, also in environmental science. Um, but today I'm here to talk about like my authentic self. And so I'll tell you my story without really holding back. And it's definitely going to be pretty personal. So I appreciate everyone's like who cares and wants to hear my story. And I don't really like talking about myself, but I will. And I think it's important for people to hear, these stories. So I realized I was transgender in 2016, but it took me almost a year to actually come out at work. And if you're not familiar, transgender people have a gender identity or gender expression that differs from the sex that they were assigned at birth. And I'll also share that I'm pansexual, which represents those people who feel attracted to a person without sort of thinking about their gender. Gender and sex are not the determining factors in your romantic or sexual attraction to other people. Um, and so I was honestly really scared of losing my job and scared of losing the trust that I had built up at the relationships at work. And I was really early career. And I really just wanted to skip all the awkward steps and move on with my life as fast as possible. But alas, change is a slow process. And also part of my part of sort of everything that informs how I am too is that my grandparents had a really strong, important part of my life and my Jewish heritage. And they took us on a lot of incredible trips around the world to countries like Israel and Spain, Hungary and Greece. And we always would visit the Holocaust museums and the Jewish temples there. And it was very impactful. Um, and I just had this understanding um, that how being different um, can really be make you feared and hated, and it really is a core part of who I am. It's just that fear and understanding. I guess it's a healthy fear. And so for some people, I think it's ideal for the workplace to be strictly professional, sterilized personal information, and that was really the prevailing culture at my work agency that I'm still at the time. And what I really had to cling on for hope was this little tiny section on the workplace discrimination poster in the break room, where it says explicit, you can't discriminate against transgender people. I'm like, oh, that's a good sign. And I was also in a really good Kaiser support group, Kaiser Permanente. They're awesome. But through this group, I would hear a lot of stories about challenges, getting a job, keeping a job, transitioning at work, and all that. And I knew that it wasn't going to be a smooth time at work transitioning. And so I was afraid of awkward encounters, confrontation, discrimination, and I was in a 7-year marriage at the time, and I was worried that that was going to end as well. And so all of my wildest dreams came true. Most of my colleagues reacted in a very affirming way, and they even would correct others who were using incorrect pronouns or like not my preferred name, which was amazing. And especially when I couldn't do it myself. Um, but there were also notable exceptions. I had requested to change my name and gender. Um, and I was trying to work with the HR department and the EEOO, Equal Opportunity Employment Officer, and they had denied my requests. And I learned that it's not always the first like safe place to go when you're trying to come out and ask for help. Um, they insisted on a court order before making any changes, and honestly, I might have given up right there, but my Kaiser support group really helped me find the laws that I needed to cite. Um, and ultimately, I got the lawyer involved at my agency, and so that really ended up okay. Eventually, some people at my agency wanted a heads up when I was going to use the men's restroom, and then another colleague had targeted me for in very inappropriate ways that ultimately led to their firing. And I like to think of these things as growing pains for the agency. Um, and then, meanwhile, at the same time, like personally, my ex-wife identifies as lesbian, and so we couldn't find a way to make it work after I transitioned, basically. So yeah, I think queer people have different unique experiences that are stressful. But I've also been very privileged. I have a lot of allies at work, family, and friends that have supported me, especially scientists. Like scientists are my community, especially if they're LGBT QIA plus. And I've had really obviously excellent, medical care through Kaiser, and I'm super grateful for everything that I do have. And I also am constantly like aware that I have a lot of privilege as being a white trans man, right? There's lots of trans feminine people, especially of color, who have it so much worse and face so much more discrimination and lack of access to resources. Um, and so that was a pretty big ramble. I will I think I'll stop it there. But yeah, thanks.
Can I make you add
Yeah,
one thing?
sure, sure.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that information. And I know that was probably not an easy thing to share. And this is going to feel silly in comparison what I'm about to ask, but can you just share a little bit of your science background?
Science background. You want to actually hear about science? Yeah.
Just a little bit, just a tiny bit.
I have a very broad environmental science background. And I've uh particularly been interested in water supply, water quality, especially nutrients. Like there was a lot of interesting nitrogen work in the Delta related to the upgrade of the regional sand wastewater treatment plant. And that also led me into being fascinated by phytoplankton and harmful algal blooms. And so I would never say that I'm an expert in any of that, but I'm also really interested in that and sediment and the microbes that live in the sediment and carbon dynamics. I worked on some field work in the Delta at these wetlands and Twitchell Island where they're have actively been trying to increase accretion and stop subsidence. And so yeah, and then also recently I've been really interested in integrating interweaving traditional knowledge with Western science, and that's been a big passion of mine as well. And also getting communities involved in science more recently as well. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I just wanted to get the full background, and then I think we're going to move to also now introduce our panelists. So I'm gonna let Dylan lead the panel, but I'm just going to call on you guys one by one so you can just give like a brief introduction of who you are. So I'm just going to do it by order that's on my screen. So Sydney, since you were the first to log on, you're first on the screen.
Cool. Okay. Hi, I'm Sydney Stark. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an assistant specialist at UC Davis with the Center for Watershed Sciences. I'm in the Carson Jeffries lab, so my focus is usually food web ecology science with fisheries. Don't know what else you want me to put into the intro.
That's perfect. Whatever you feel comfortable putting in the intro is what we want. Zoe, you are next.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a junior specialist with the UC Davis Center for Watershed Sciences, and I work primarily with Sarah Yarnell on meadow restoration. So these meadows are being restored in a lot of different ways, but primarily with the implementation of beaver dam analogs. which are essentially man-made dams that are replicating what beaver dams do. And so I'm looking at the restoration effect from a hydrology perspective, particularly surface water and groundwater.
Amazing. Thank you. And then Theo, Claire?
Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here. I am a environmental scientist with the Department of Water Resources Riverine Stewardship Program, and I'm going to share a little bit about my background the way Dylan did, if I have like 2 minutes to do that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
I came out as transgender when I was 14. I knew pretty young that I was not going to be, that being a woman was not going to work out for me, and it didn't. And I was raised in a really queer family. My mom is a lesbian, and I she was supportive, but her wife was not when I came out. And I also spent a lot of time in the Kaiser Permanente trans mask support groups led by Rachel and really got a lot out of them. Cheers, Dylan. And I went to college. I actually chose to go to a women's college because they had a trans inclusive admissions policy. And I specialized in environmental science with a focus in political ecology and native studies. And when I graduated college, I spent some time working for the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe on the Elwha River restoration of the National Park Service in the North Cascades region, actually doing like invasive plant management and revegetation work. And as I started doing more river-based work and especially dam removal and working closely with tribal fisheries scientists, I really started to put the pieces together between extinction and colonialism and genocide in California especially, and started to see the crucial interventions needed both to repair our heavily damaged systems, our water systems, our ecosystems, and also the necessity to bring repair to the relationship between people and land. And I started realizing that meant that I wanted to work with fish directly and salmon specifically and other anadromous cultural use species like sturgeon and lamprey. So I took a year in the Watershed Stewards program and went to CDFW Wairika wanting to work on the Klamath since I had just come from the Elwha. And working in Wairika was a rude awakening. Having been raised by lesbians and going to an inclusive women's college, it was really, really hard. And I was subject to significant harassment. There was a great deal of office speculation. At that point, I had already transitioned, but was a little bit androgynous. And there was a great deal of office speculation about my body. And I tried to bring it up to supervisors and was told, like, fisheries is a boys' club. If you want to be a fisheries scientist, get used to it. And that was really hard for me. I did not have safe access to healthcare. And at the end of my year, I was like, wow, I really love the Klamath. I feel so passionately about this work, but I can't keep living here. So I moved back home to Sacramento and got a job as a JS at the Fungi Lab. So I appreciate hearing from you JSs and ASs out there. And got to work much more closely with green sturgeon, which I especially loved and build up. I'd been mostly a field ecologist with the Park Service and working for the Lower Elwha Clallam tribe. So I appreciated the opportunity to develop some lab skills. And then I came to DWR as an environmental scientist a couple of years ago, and I work doing urban streams restoration and also salmon reintroduction. I work closely with the Winnemem Wintu tribe on the reintroduction of winter run Chinook salmon above Shasta Dam. I'm the lead fisheries biologist on DWR's juvenile collection trap. And I was lucky that by the time I came to DWR, my legal name was all in order, but I worked with Ted to try and push a policy to make it easier to change preferred names. I still don't have access to a bathroom, honestly, in my building. There's one gender neutral bathroom and it's down on the first floor, out past security next to the cafeteria. And so that continues. There are like still real access barriers. And I know that people within DWR are working really hard to change that. But I think at this moment in fisheries science, there is an old guard, an old boys club that fisheries has a reputation for, and it has earned that reputation. And there's also a generation of scientists that are actually predominantly women, queer, trans, multiracial, multilingual, And I see that really changing the horizons of fisheries science. And so I'm really excited to be on this panel and hear from you all about your experiences as we build a different discipline together.
Thank you for that, Theo, and a lovely introduction, and we appreciate those words, and I'm glad to have you here as well. And then last but certainly not least, Matt Salvador. Whatever form of introduction you want.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for sharing all that, Theo. That's very vulnerable of you and very powerful. Um, but my name's Matt Salvador, he, him. I work alongside Sydney Stark. I'm assistant specialist in the Johnson Jeffries lab. I am a resident entomologist, and I work on constructing food webs in the Sacramento River and recently the McCloud River, looking at macroinvertebrates. Um, and I'm a gay cis male. That'll be my intro.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt. All right, Dylan, I'm turning it back over to you to lead on the questions and everything.
All right, thank you. Wow, thank you so much for being here and for sharing that. Lots of questions that we could go into, but I think uh, I would love to know more about how has being in the LGBTQIA plus um, community really shaped your perspective, your approach, your leadership, and collaboration for science. And does anyone want to go first, or I could call on people? Theo, I think your cat is nominating you to go first.
Yeah, she really wants the lunch that's sitting on my desk, but she's not allowed to have it. How has being an LGBTQ person changed our relationship to fisheries science and our experience of science? I think that I understand queerness not just as an identity or a lived experience, but also as a mode of relationship. And I think that there are queer ways of being with each other and the world that really subvert kind of what you were saying earlier, Dylan, about the professional objectivity. Like, you're a scientist, you come in with minimal biases and produce objective, verifiable work. End of story. But that's actually not true. We do have relationships to each other. We have relationships to our study species. We have plenty of bias that we bring to the table. And none of the science that we produce is produced in a vacuum. It's all produced in a web of relationships. And I think that queerness opens doors to ways of relating that are way outside the norm. Fisheries science in particular, right, has a lineage of baggage, especially if we like trace back modern fisheries and aquaculture to like Livingstone Stone's hatchery at Baird Station on the McCloud River. Like, there are particular gendered and racialized norms underpinning all of our methods and ways of monitoring or doing research as fisheries scientists. And I think that queerness opens the door to bring those histories in. And I think it also allows us to relate to each other in ways that aren't possible or encouraged within like hegemonic white supremacy or heteropatriarchy or like whatever words you're using to describe the power and social structures that we live in. I think that queerness allows us to, it requires that we confront those directly because our sexuality and gender expressions are also part of, nope, sorry, cat's going away. We know that gender and sexuality is deeply embedded in structures of race and class, and we bring our whole selves to our work as scientists. And I think that queerness, for me, has been, like Dylan, you said that your people are other queer scientists. And I think that being scientists also brings something to our queerness. It brings an attention to the material world. It brings an attention to, like, not material as in like stuff, but like what is actually happening in the world. And ecology is also all about relationships. It's the study of what influences what and how things are connected and interdependence. And I think that we bring that to our communities as well. So I'll offer that as a place to start.
Thank you. Yeah, that's such a positive way of looking at it too. I appreciate that. Anyone want to add to that? Yeah, so
So Theo kind of touched on this, but like, we all have these intersecting like identities and like that influences like how we interact with the world, how the world interacts with us. And so I think for me, I can't really separate my queer identity from my Black identity. My Blackness informs my queerness, and my queerness informs my Blackness. And I think particularly in environmental science and fisheries science, um, we don't have a lot of Black perspectives. And for a really long time, we didn't have a lot of queer perspectives. And I think we still don't have a lot of Black queer perspectives. And I think um, I can bring that sort of perspective, and I'm only one person. And I think I've learned in my career that working with people with different lived experiences, we can all sort of like bring our perspectives to come up with more complete solutions to these complex problems. And I think even exploring or like realizing your queer identity, for me personally, I think makes me a better scientist because I think, so I'm a lesbian, and I think when I came to that realization, it was kind of like, oh, what I thought my life was going to be like is not really that anymore. The way like I think of myself as a woman is completely changed now. And I think I really had to think about what I wanted my life to be since I kind of had to like naturally deviate from the path that was expected of me. And so I think I question a lot about the reason we do things. And I think in science, I bring that up a lot, like, oh yeah, we've been doing it like this for like 10 years, but why? I think there's other ways that we can approach things. And I think there's, especially too, working in like so many different systems, like we try to be like, oh, we do this in wetlands, and then we do this in inland environments. But like when you work in all these different environments, you realize that like each system is so complex and you can't really just do these like blanket solutions to everything. And so I think sort of questioning things makes you a better scientist, and I think it makes me a better scientist.
absolutely. Yeah, Matt.
Um, I really like the comparison of like using the relationships to look between queerness and every other form of identity that we have. Um, because that helps me. You guys made me realize what my answer to this question was. Because I remember being young and learning I was gay, and still getting my inklings of what like I wanted to do in my life and learning like I kind of like science and I like experiments and I like detail orientation and kind of pinpointing things out. And a lot of those lessons I learned from being queer, gathering evidence. And by that I mean like getting on Yahoo Answers, being like, am I gay? And then like micro looking at all my interactions with other men, looking at like interactions of what a general hetero interaction is. And growing up in a time where queer identity wasn't very common, you didn't really see that in media. So a lot of my identity that was forming was from like having to look at these little tiny interactions and forming these details and overthinking so many things, which indirectly kind of led to a lot of my scientific reasoning and like how I kind of look at the world around me. Um, and it just all kind of seems to fit together so strongly.
Can also piggyback off of that. I I'm actually pretty new in my queer identity. I didn't really realize until like a year and a half ago. So that's kind of something that's made me realize that growing in this profession is there. You can grow in this profession, you can grow in your identity, and it's also helped me feel more connected with my colleagues, with all my collaborators. And then yeah, sorry, I thought I had more there, but it's relatively new to me, so it's still something that I'm kind of like exploring and still figuring out, and that's still kind of helping me drive how I am in my science field, and what questions to ask, and being there and allowing people to converse with me in ways that is respectful, in ways that I can be there for them, kind of.
Yeah, thank you. I think too that I really appreciate how being queer changes your perspective for everything else. And it just I think everyone should be taking on this mentality too of breaking down the boxes that society has placed on us, that society is still trying to force us into, and in every respect of that, not just gender, but also like what is science, right? And what is inclusive? Like what can you include in science? And I'm struggling with that too in my own agency of like we have a charge for the best available science, right? But like, is that just biophysical science? I don't think it is. So I'm working to sort of try to be a little bit more inclusive of what is included in science, because um, my bias obviously is that the more perspectives the better, and especially if you have traditional knowledge holders with like millennia of information, how is that not better than the Western science that we have from a couple hundred years of experimentation? So I try to think from that perspective of like the timeline of geologic timelines are so yeah. I really appreciate everyone's contributions there. And I guess sort of related to this too is how have you personally cultivated a sense of belonging where you are and or community? Because I know I struggle with this, so would love to hear what you all have to say. Matt, go ahead.
Hi. This is my sense of belonging is very closely tied, honestly, with my lab, in terms of queer identity, because our PIs, Carson Jeffries and Rachel Johnson, have hired and cultivated a lab that is so diverse and has just come from such a large variety of backgrounds that it's like, first of all, A plus to them because that's incredible. Because there's just so much different backgrounds, and like whenever we have people that come through our lab, people like point that out. We're a woman-dominated lab. I'm sorry, let me word that better. A majority of our lab is women. A majority of our lab is queer, and these are things that both on both sides. When I remember watching like Animal Planet, and it's all just white men. It's presumably straight. So it's really cool to have this like large community of not only just scientists, and not only just people of color, but also queer people, that can all come together, and we all have, in some form, these similar backgrounds and similar life experiences from that are different from each other, but also similar in each other, as contradictory as that is. Um, so cultivating a sense of belonging in our lab has been honestly just simple. It's just been being myself, being out and being proud, and just seeing positive reactions to that. And I will also say that's incredibly privileged, and I am so grateful I'm in a lab where I can say that. Um, and that's my answer.
If you don't mind, can I go next?
Go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, sorry, Theo. Um, like I said, it's been like a year and a half since I've come into my own queer identity, and it was a year and a half that I started in the JJ Lab. It's a space where everyone feels like you can just talk to them and you can be open and you can be authentic. And like I've come from spaces where like all of my friends are usually like in queer spaces. A lot of my friends from my master's are in queer spaces. And it wasn't until I got here where I could take that step back and talking with my colleagues and talking with them about their queer identities where it started hitting for me and started being like, oh, wait, I do identify with some of the things that you're talking about. So that's been a magical experience for me. This lab has been awesome. And just the way that they've been able to develop that by just being respectful and listening and supportive, has been amazing. And that's some of the stuff that's been really helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely not always the case, right? Yeah, Theo, go ahead.
When I was working up in Wairika, right, which I alluded to really being hostile, um, I had one colleague who had my back. And when when the harassment started really ramping up, he came to work with his nails painted bright blue. And he didn't say anything about it. but it was a show of solidarity. Like, you guys are giving Theo a really hard time because they're queer. Uh, he's not, this is not a queer man, you know, but he saw the way that I was being treated and it wasn't okay with him. So he came to work with his nails painted blue. And it meant a huge amount to me. I also think about Ted Flynn in DWR, who has really seen the way some of his queer and trans colleagues are treated and said, that's not okay with me. I'm going to leverage my positionality as a cis white guy who's been here for forever to like push for some changes. You guys are newer. You guys are still on probation. You guys don't have a lot of power. That's okay. I got your back. Tell me what you need. We'll make it happen. And that kind of support has been really incredible, and has at times made it like possible for me to stay in the field, right? Um, Currently, I'm lucky to work with a fantastic team of people, and several of my colleagues are queer. When I was at the Davis lab, working as a JS, also, tons of my colleagues were queer or at least hip in with it. Which is part of what I was talking about earlier. Like, we are coming up on a pretty major cultural and generational shift in fisheries. The current crop of young professionals in fisheries, not what it used to look like. I think about the Watershed Stewards program too, right? Like, the Watershed Stewards program is a Seas and AmeriCorps program that puts a ton of young people into fisheries in California specifically. And they always attend the Salmonid Restoration Federation. And when I went to SRF this year, um, I was hanging out with a lot of other queer fisheries scientists. You know, we're everywhere. Internally, DWR has just started affinity groups. And so now there's a DWR wide Teams chat that allies and queer people can be added to, where people check in about their days, people grab lunch once in a while. Sometimes there are meetings. We coordinated marching in Pride. And so those kind of spaces also, I mean, if you're looking for support now, there are so many other queer fisheries folks out there. Um, and we've also got a lot of people willing to go for bat for us. When the federal executive orders came out and when my federal colleagues were instructed to take their pronouns out of their email signature, I also took my pronouns out of my email signature because I communicate with a lot of folks from other agencies, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself and cause any problems for myself, and I didn't want to cause any problems for them. Um, and so I think this is a moment where we really do need solidarity with each other and to create and maintain spaces, whether it's like a department-wide group chat or two people that you know have your back that you get lunch with once in a while. I think this is a moment where solidarity is being asked of us. And not just solidarity among queer people, but solidarity between queer people and people who share other marginalized identities. This is a time that we need to be sticking up for our immigrant friends, for our friends of color, for our disabled friends. This is right, we are all in this together. And I think a lot of us know that and are hungry for connection and looking to be of support.
Thank you, Theo. Yeah. Zoe?
So when I did my undergrad at Davis, and then after I graduated, I worked for a bit in Orange County, and I think it was a really big culture shock because I think at Davis, I think is where like I sort of came to realize I was queer, and I think Davis does a really good job of supporting its queer community. I think also we just kind of live in a bubble where there are just a lot of queer people. And I think I was sort of shocked when I started working in Orange County, where I don't know, I sort of started realizing that just like my cultural frame of references were really different from some of my coworkers. Like even like I just say like, oh, like this movie that I really love, and they're like, what are you even talking about? And so I started realizing that any sort of personal conversation I had with people really started sending out signals that I'm like queer. And I think I was sort of left with a choice of like, do I like kind of make myself smaller in this environment, or do I make myself bigger, especially too, because I didn't have really any like queer coworkers that were like out or talked about it. And I think one, it's obviously easier said than done to sort of like take up all this space. I think we always say like the phrase that like we want to take up a space, but like it's hard, it's scary, like you're opening yourself up to be like rejected in a lot of ways. Um, and so I think one way that I started building community, particularly with some of my coworkers, and when I worked in SoCal, was I sort of knew that I had community elsewhere, but also enough support that like I could sort of be that person that's sort of like open with my queerness and talk about it. And that like led to a lot of my coworkers, not necessarily talking about it with like the whole staff, but like talking to me personally about it. And I think it made me feel a lot connected to my coworkers, but also how I built a lot of my friendships that way. Um, and then I think coming back to Davis, I've just been like, wow, everyone I meet seems to be queer, so I didn't really have to put in much work up here, I'll admit.
Anything else to add? I guess I'll just add too that I've personally worked with Ted Flynn, and he's really done a lot of amazing work on this front. And even as something as simple as having a sign outside of his or in his cubicle that has a rainbow on it, and basically saying, "Come talk to me if you need." And I know he's done a lot of work at GWR to try to make things better. So it's like alleys like that that really make a huge difference. I think at our agency too, we've tried to put together sort of like affinity groups, and they they did end up getting shut down. But for a while there, we had a really good lunchtime like chat that we were able to sort of bring our whole selves and share that with everyone. And I really got a lot out of those, and I think that would be a really great thing to implement, and to not have to talk about work with your coworkers, and to really get to know people on a better level, to especially when there's cultural barriers too, and just like where are you coming from, and making those connections. So I wish we had more of that in general. Um, so yeah, thank you. So feel free to add questions in the chat too for us. I think we're all pretty open to answering whatever questions you might have. Yeah, sure.
So I just had a question that just kind of popped up. So as those that here from CWS know, I've newly found in a leadership role here at Center for Watershed Sciences. Thank you. That wasn't meant to brag, but I just want to know, what can I do like in this role to make sure, I know CWS is a fairly inclusive place as it is, if no one else can tell. Um, and as we've mentioned, Davis is its own little bubble, which is something I've always appreciated for being able to raise my kids here. I'm like, there's a reason why I pay so much to live here. But so what would you have for those who are what advice would you give to those in leadership positions to continue to make a very inclusive environment? I haven't really decorated my office yet, so maybe I'll get a rainbow. Oh, actually, I do have a rainbow pen that I just added. But yeah, so just, what are things that me and others in other leadership positions, like what's Ted Flynn doing that like we can mimic here? Um, yeah, just kind of things like that would be great to hear from you all.
Great question. I wish all the leaders would ask that question. Um,
I'm
any,
asking it for them.
yeah, thanks. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I have a couple thoughts.
Yeah.
Honestly, bathroom access has been a big one for me in my career. Like, actually at Davis, it was fine. Thank you, Hydrolab. So I'll address this question, like not to you specifically, but to anybody. It is actually very surprising how limited bathroom access can be, and that has serious health consequences for people who don't have access to safe bathrooms. There are real health consequences to that, and safety consequences. Advocating for things like easy name change policies, like Dylan should not have had to get a court order or a lawyer involved There are so many reasons people use different names. People from other countries will often choose anglicized first names to make it easier and to gain a little bit more respect. People use nicknames. Nobody's out there like, oh, Randall, but we call you Randy, but we can't make your screen name Randy because um, yeah. So some of those policies are places that small actions can make a big difference to improve accessibility. But I think the other piece of it that we've all kind of touched on is coming to our work as people first, and building relationships within our communities, not just as scientists or colleagues, but as people who share a lot of time together and allowing us to bring our whole selves to that work, even through like basic team building and trust building exercises, or taking the extra hour to do a staff lunch or do some kind of like offsite team building exercise can be really important um, for allowing all scientists in your cohort or in your agency to feel supported and figure out who has their back, because somebody does have our back always. There's almost always at least one person. But there's not always the space to figure out who that person is or connect with them and figure out what they can offer and what you need.
Like literally taking notes on what Theo was saying. Um, yeah, I've actually thought about the bathroom access situation for our building, but like our building is so small and we like don't really have many bathrooms even to start with, and our building's old too. So I've thought about that too. So I'm always happy to take suggestions on that. But yeah, we have like four total, like two upstairs and two downstairs, I think. And the ones upstairs I don't like because they smell like mold. Um, again, old building. Sorry, Zoe, I know that's near your office. Anybody else want to add to that? Sorry, I kind of interrupted. That's true. Changing the signs, that's an easy one.
I mean, I think obviously you need a bigger rainbow than what you have. That would be great. No, but I mean, I think just your attitude, it's so small. Yeah. Just your attitude of being open to hearing these things and actually like asking the question on how can we make things better is everything, honestly. I mean, if we think about the institutional, like not just people in leaderships, but like the institutions themselves and how they're preventing um, equality and belonging and the ability to form communities. Like that's a whole nother issue that I it would be nice to not have an administration that's trying to like erase queer identities. Like that would be a good start, I feel like. But I there's a lot that you can do personally that sort of does it makes a huge difference. So thank you. Yeah, Matt.
Um, 1 second, there's beeping happening. Okay, sorry. Murray, you do a great job about this. But I'm gonna highlight as someone especially who's led a lot of field crews and stuff, like part of the thing you think about is like is are we doing safe work? Is my team safe? Are we hydrated? How are we doing? Are we in high spirits? You have like these base needs that need to be addressed so people can work in their best form. And that extends to like laboratory work and all the other forms of work related to that. And I bring that up because like it's important to make sure people feel safe in the environment they're working in, and how setting up safe spaces are actually like really important to having people at their mental best, and happy mind, happy body, and stuff like that. So that's more of like a general comment because I think our lab does a really good job at that. But there are labs that don't care for stuff like that, and then you ending up with people who feel like they have to shunt who they are, and then it shuts out. They just make worse scientist, I guess, in a way, because you just can't be your full self and you're just always going to have something in your mind that's like blocked, if you know what I mean.
I was gonna add at my last job, we did a training on just sort of like how you should be like interacting with your coworkers, particularly like in a field environment. And Theo kind of touched on this, how like fisheries for a really long time was this boys club. And so like, they're out in the field and they're like making these jokes. And sometimes like oftentimes that results in like people being taking the brunt of those jokes. And I think that seminar was really good because I think one, it just sort of like laid out a clear baseline for everyone, but also it made me feel better about going into the field because I think before I used to again make myself really small in the field because I just felt like I was such an outlier, but also you don't want to shake the boat too much and be like you never want to be the one that complains, you know what I mean? Especially too when you don't know if there's anyone that's going to be there to support you in like when you talk about this. So I think that seminar was really good because it made me feel like I had a clear path on like who I can go talk to about this, but also what sort of everyone's expectations are, and also how you should be interacting with your coworkers in an environment where you kind of like obviously we all know this, but like field work is a really unique work experience because like, sometimes you're driving 2.5 hours to a site and it's like, do we really want to talk about work for 2.5 hours? Like, no. And then also too, sometimes like you have to like work over, like stay overnight and you're not going to be like, it's not going to be 9 p.m. and you want to be like talking about like what you want to do the next day. And so I really appreciated that seminar. I think it made me feel a lot more comfortable about being myself in the field. And I think it made my relationships with my coworkers a lot better because I think it kind of made them open up and act like people too.
I think some of the stuff that came to mind for me was it hasn't really happened here all that much. But like in my master's, I was lucky to work with people that would recognize instances that could develop to be unsafe instances in the field. Like when you're interacting with the public sometimes, or interacting with people that maybe give off an unsafe feeling. So I was lucky to have people in the field with me that would recognize that and then remove people from that situation, would move them away. Like honestly, just leaving in the boat sometimes was like the solution, or moving away from those situations was very helpful. And then not making a big deal about it, and maybe debriefing later, but not in a way that makes you feel bad for being in those situations. It's that was pretty helpful for me, but that usually revolved around my identity as a woman. So I can see how that would also be helpful when you're in your queer identity too. Just being able to diffuse situations that could become bad.
We are coming up to almost the end of the lunch hour. So I want to thank you guys all. But if there's any other audience questions, I would love to still be able to include them. Sometimes these seminars have a tendency to run a little bit past one. So if you can stay, that's great. If Dylan, I know you're particularly a busy guy. I used to work with Dylan at DSC. He's a busy dude. So if you need to leave at one, I totally understand. But yeah, if there's any like last minute questions and stuff.
One thing I also wanted to bring up too, since we have a second, is just like for me, what would have really helped is to know who I should talk to know who I can trust and can talk to, and especially knowing what the complaint process would be, is such a black hole of information at state agencies usually. And, I mean, there's like regulations that we have to follow and stuff, but when it comes down to practice and when you have to do that yourself, it's horrifying and like really overwhelming. And you don't know who you can trust, and you don't know if you're going to honestly be like retaliated against. And I don't think that we've fixed that problem at all. So I think setting up like a peer network is great, or USGS has like a train the trainer program of setting up people who can be there just to listen and not to be a mandated reporter for things. So yeah, those are all really good models that I've seen too.
So I will say for UC Davis or for the UCs, like for instance, I'm a mandatory reporter, but I do always let people know the option of like you can talk to me outside of work hours if you're just wanting to talk about solutions or paths. Um, for complaints without me having to mandatory report. So that would have to happen outside of a work hour. And I'm totally happy to do that, and I've taken those. And then there is like training that hopefully all of you UC people have done, because it is mandatory about the complaint process, but it's still kind of a black hole. And that's something that I'm going to put in I already have it in our resource packet for our welcome packet that will be available. So, and sorry, Theo, you had something, and then
Yeah.
I have one more plug for AFS after Theo goes.
I'll also have to leave right at 1 for another
Oh,
meeting. But I just wanted to say that one other thing that people can do to be supportive is to gender your colleagues correctly. I don't really advocate for myself in the workplace. It's not worth it. People use whatever pronouns they want for me, and it's like, okay, you say what you say, fine. You know, it's like, fine. It's not worth it for me to disrupt that professional relationship by advocating for myself because it makes people defensive. Even people that are really well intended. When they're like, oh, she, and I'm like, actually, I prefer they. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Oh my God. And then sometimes or they'll say, like, whatever, you know? Either way, it's disruptive. But it means so much to me when another colleague will say, actually, Theo prefers they. And you should also like talk to your colleagues about whether or not they want you to intervene. Some people don't want any intervention, but it has been really meaningful for me when colleagues have stood up for me and asked that I be gendered correctly, especially by like my boss or other people who have power over me, where I don't feel able to advocate for myself from even though under California law, intentionally misgendering somebody counts as sexual harassment, it still happens all the time. And so paying attention to how those dynamics are playing out and checking in with your trans or gender nonconforming colleagues about what kind of support that they might want can be meaningful.
thank you for that, Theo. I'm just going to turn it over to Edward Culver for a quick second. He's with the National AFS chapter, and he's going to talk about Fishcast real fast and just what that is.
Hi everybody. Honestly, great to hear everyone's stories. Super important. My name is Ed Culver, and I'm a fisheries biologist here at East Bay Regional Park District in Oakland. I came to sort of plug. I'm on the leadership board for the National AFS Fishcast, which is the cultural advocacy and sustainability team, which is our new DEI, because anything federal DEI is yeah, we all know that situation. I'm also a part of the Western Division AFS recruitment and retention, which is their version of the DEI group. And I'm originally from the Midwest, but love being in California. And I've always seen California and the Western Division of AFS being the leaders in a lot of DEI work and making meetings be inclusive and make people feel welcome. And now we're really pushing the national society to be that way. I don't know how many people attend national meetings, but sometimes it's not the best. We really are pushing to advocate more for that. And luckily, the upcoming president has been super supportive of us. Just a plug, if anyone is interested in participating, I can get you in touch with the Western Division AFS, or I can show you the Fishcast, which is the national version. We're always supportive and always are looking for people to help us make it a better group and make AFS better. So if you're interested, I'll throw my personal email in the chat. I know we've had some issues with federal employees using work emails, because all of their emails are searched now. So I always use my personal email, whichever you feel comfortable with. If you're interested in messaging me, I would love the support and help.
Thank you so much, Edward.
Yeah.
I appreciate you plugging that. I will say that, I've been involved with AFS as a leader for the president at the Calneva chapter for the past 3 years, and it's been a really rewarding experience, and it's given me opportunities, to come up with things like this webinar series and to give opportunities and to highlight topics that I think that are important and that the chapter supports. So this has been a great thing for me to be a part of, and I have really encouraged those to get involved at any level. We also have our own, we're thinking about changing the name as well because we recognize the issues with those in federal positions being able to participate in something that's a DEI committee right now. So having the retention or fish cast names are good. Kimberly Evans here at Watershed also leads that for the Calneva chapter, and she's new in this role, and we're looking for ways to just get Calneva more involved and to do more. So if you have any suggestions, more people can always work with her. We don't have to have just one person on any committee. Multiple people can be on it. Many hands make light work. So it's always great if you guys are wanting to participate at any of those levels. All right. Dylan, do you have any final, or I know Theo had to jump off, but yeah, I'll turn it over to you guys real fast if you guys have any final thoughts or parting words that you want to leave us with, or last bit of advice, anything.
Thank you. I mean, thanks so much for inviting us, and it's been a pleasure to be able to talk to everyone. I don't have anything personally, but I would love to if anyone else does. Yeah, like a parting words or.
I'm just gonna sort of like reiterate what you just said, but yeah, thank you for having me on. I was really happy to sort of like hear what everyone else had to say and like also share my own perspective. So thanks for having me.
I also have to hop off, but I'd like to say thank you for including me. And for everyone listening, thank you for being here. It's very important to hear other people's perspectives on this. And there's lots to learn from each other. So thank you.
Also, thank you for having me on this panel as well. And it's great really learning about everyone's experiences.
Yeah, and I appreciate you guys all accepting the invitation and being here today and, being vulnerable in front of a group of people, even though it's like on a computer and they're all black boxes right now, it's still, I recognize that you guys are putting yourself out there in a very vulnerable way, and I really appreciate you doing so to come talk with us. And so thank you all for participating. Dylan, thank you so much for helping me come up with this idea like back in like February when I like ran up to you and was like, hey. Um, so I appreciate that.
Thank you so much, Mara. This was awesome. Yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, and it's good seeing you too. I miss seeing you at
Yeah.
work. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's lunch hour webinar. Hope to see you next month to learn how to draw a leopard shark. I'm sure mine will look terrible, and I will show my leopard shark to you guys, and we can see how it looks compared to everybody else's. So I'm ready for that, but I don't particularly like drawing, so next month is actually going to be interesting for me. But hope to see you all back here next month, and thank you guys for attending this month. Bye, everyone.